specialist, and they decided that George needed to be bloodlet. And so they cut his arm and drained off about a quarter of his blood. And he didn't instantly get better, so they went to their second best. And you see this little beetle down here. That's a blister beetle. And you just grind those up and you rub it on your body and you get these beautiful blood blisters. So of course he wasn't breathing well, so they rubbed him around his neck and he had blood blisters, and the doctor was able to drain those, and lo and behold, he didn't get better. So they turned around with a couple more doctors advising they drained more blood out of him.
Could you do this sitting down, but maybe some people are sitting down, would that work?
I can try, sure.
Okay.
Give me it. Yeah. So if anybody's really interested, Chuck, I got it. This is a book to look at. Back to the original slide, somebody may say today, how come 1794? Why didn't we start from the beginning? New England was 100 years before this and they had doctors. And rather than just to say to everybody, we didn't have any white folks living here, I want to prove it to you. King of England, 1763, drew this line, the preemption line, up the East Coast, and guaranteed to the Native Americans that no more land would be given to white settlers to the west of that line, which ended up being very fortunate for the American colonies. This is New York State, and the line is faint, but you can see, trace it here underneath the Finger Lakes, and it goes up here to Fort Stanwix. And that gave us our original Onondaga County shape. When we fought the Revolution, we told the soldiers that signed up for each state, if we won the war, they would get a chunk of the land. New York State had boundary troubles with Massachusetts. They attempted to give the soldiers the Adirondacks up here. Our soldiers were pretty sharp and they said no way. So Onondaga County was formed. You'll notice on the other states here, they all have little military tracks set up. And they were all on the west side of the preemption line. Onondaga County, set up 1790, all our town. If we took a common present-day map and looked at it, this would be the original Onondaga County. You can see it goes way past, way past Ithaca, way over to Geneva. Okay. This, in 1794, this was, our Fabius location was part of the town of Pompey. Town of Fabius, 1798, included Tully, and now we've had settlers here for 4 years. Present-day Fabius is this tiny little spot right here. These are all the people that we've been able to find information on that served the people in the town of Fabius. It's a long list, an awful lot of names. We're going to try to get through the best of them today. All the slides you'll see from here on are on display in the back side over there. So if we move too fast and you want to go back and learn about some of the people, you can go back and read the full slide information. For a number of years we've been collecting information from people to put on this presentation, and we want to say thank you to those, although some of our helpers have passed away in the meantime. And a special thanks goes out to Charles Shea, who's been tremendous at having resources available, answering those questions, making sense of things that didn't make any sense to us when we put them together. And an extra thanks goes out to my wife, Joanne Casey, who's done a lot of this research, and she sits in the back of the room hiding today because she's too shy to stand up here or sit up here and make this presentation. But a lot of the work that we see here is what she's done and the diligence she's put into gathering these facts. And she's letting me sit here and take all the glory for it. Now, when we originally had this idea 4 or 5 years ago, we worked with Carol Gosner who passed away last summer, and she told us the worst thing in the world you could do with this kind of a presentation is stand up and lecture somebody about the history, and that we should engage the community to share their thoughts and ideas and experiences. Well, we're going to start out in early 1800s, so there's probably not much knowledge there, but as we get along to more present day situations, I want everybody to feel free to just speak out, share any things that you have, make any corrections, and I don't have to sit here and take notes because Chuck has got it all being recorded. So feel free, you don't have to raise your hand, just speak right up, and this is an open community discussion. This is a map with the red letters, the red numbers. You can see where our doctors are located in the first century of our town. And now we're going to take a look at some of the actual people. To give you an idea of what it took to be a doctor, prior to 1797, you could go to college, if you could find a college and if you had the money to go, graduate from medical school, and then you're a licensed physician. Or you could work under an existing doctor who was licensed and serve under him for 1 year, and you would become a doctor. It didn't make any difference whether the doctor you were learning under knew anything or was any good. If he certified you, then you were a doctor. 1797, you were required to serve for 4 years under a doctor. So we're upgrading the standards, but still, once you were a doctor, nobody took your license away. Pretty dangerous thing. 1806, we've changed the law to now you have to be part of a county medical society. That medical society can now revoke your license if they found it fit. So we're developing some controls. And here we just talk about the different kinds of physicians. And let's take a look. Our first physician serving the area of Fabius is what we're calling a circuit rider doctor. That means he does not live in town. He kind of makes a regular pattern through the town, stopping on those people that he's working with, and of course all your neighbors know whether you need the doctor and you hail him when he comes through town, or if you have an emergency, you race to his home, try to find him, try to leave a message, and hope that you can get him. Dr. Park lived in Pompey West Hill, which later became Lafayette. He served in areas as far north as Liverpool, as far west Skaneateles, east Cazenovia, and south is Portland. So he was in great demand. It's hard to know about the practices of different doctors. We've put together whatever data we could. I don't know our audience and their interests, and I'm going to just keep moving on through these doctors, and if I'm going too fast, just tell me to stop or go back to a slide. And I have various doctors, I have little stories that will make it a little bit more exciting. But you can see the research that's gone into each one of these people.
Bill?
Yes.
And it's kind of hard to read from the back. Can you tell where these doctors were located in the village?
Oh, I have to go back to the slide to see if Dr. Miller actually shows. And Joanne, can you help me at all? We don't have a physical location for Dr. Miller?
No, we don't.
Okay.
And he was from Washington County, and he decided to become a doctor, and he appeared before the Navy, and the Navy doctor told him that he was just too skinny to be a doctor, that he'd be better off being a skeleton in his office. And some of these doctors just came into Fabius for a very short time. They'd serve under another doctor, and they just stayed for a year. Even when they went to college, they'd stay in Fabius for a very, very short time.
But Dr. Miller did progress to become a physician, and he lived in the lower part of of Fabius, and he did like farming. And when you were a physician, you didn't necessarily just be a doctor. You quite often kept sheep and cows and had farm and land. And we'll go on here. Of course, we've got a few epidemics going on at the same time. You can see that our Fabius population is now up to 2,500 people. We had a Dr. Upson who stayed with us quite a long time, about 20 years, and at the time he was practicing, young doctors were coming out of school and they no longer bled patients. And he thought that was pretty crazy because it had worked for years, and he didn't care for these newfangled ideas. He also had invented a dandelion syrup which cured a lot of problems in people. And we were able to find an advertisement for his product. He probably was not in Fabius when he was selling that. We have a John Dorn that we don't know too much about him other than we did locate his gravestone in the Apelia Cemetery, and it's buried so deep we can't even get his date of death from it. Hiram Adams was a well-liked, well-respected physician. And one of the things that left behind was how hard he worked for his patients. And that he was taking care of immigrants that nobody else would touch that were suffering from typhus and shipping fever as they made their trip over from Europe. And it eventually cost him his life as he worked so hard. He also became sick. It would be nice if there was something left behind for us on all these people that had spent many years caring for everybody, but medical records, of course, are destroyed or taken with the doctor and not left behind, so we don't know too much about their activities.
Homer Adams was the son of Hiram Adams. He was born in Fabius, and he went out to Wisconsin for his education, and he became a doctor out there, and he just dropped dead out there at a very young age, just years after his father died. The house that's pictured in the bottom corner is the house that they lived in, and that's at the corner of Main Street and Ridge Road, right across from the monument. And that's where his funeral took place, in that house. It was the house of his parents.
And this is in the 1860s? Is that what that says there?
The funeral, yeah, 1867.
Yeah.
Because I think it was around that time that, the Mayo brothers and their father, who founded Mayo Clinic in Rochester, were doing medical education and stuff, so maybe that was part of why he went out there, although he went to Wisconsin and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, on the end was the doctor's office. On the east end of the building. Wow.
He died out in Wisconsin, and they brought his body back, and he's buried in the Evergreen Cemetery with his family.
Can you help us on this one, Joanne?
This is your part.
Why don't you come right up and join me?
This is Lorenzo Heffron. He was an allopath physician, and allopath is more of a modern type physician. They use x-rays, and except they didn't have x-rays then, but they use more modern techniques. And an eclectic physician would use the homeopathic and the modern techniques. He was just a regular doctor. They lived in a house that would be 2 doors down from the Methodist church. It was one of the buildings that was removed when they built the elementary school in 1929. They demolished the houses. The house, according to Charlie, was moved back off the foundation and onto the onto the school property. And one of the wings of that house went on the back of the Thompson house, which is now the Powers house, on the other side of the monument. That was their kitchen. After Dr. Lorenzo left, the house belonged to the Hurley, and it would have been Mary Hurley Brennan's grandparents, and there's a picture in the center of her grandparents. This photo came from Mary Brennan.
It looks like an awful nice house that just removed to build the school, but the school's kind of nice too. We have some notes from a diary of 1871 where Dr. Heffron is mentioned in it. I was going to get Sandy to try to read these, but she said that she couldn't see them that well.
This is a story about little Charlie Harris, and I can't remember how old he was. He was just real young, and he got real sick. And so they called the doctor, but the doctor they called was a Dr. Potter from Delphi. And Dr. Potter tried to make him better, and his little sister Althea got sick too. And it kind of shows you that the community was very active when a family got sick, that they would come and help because there was laundry to do and meals to cook. Usually the mother would stay with the children that were sick. And it tells how someone came in and did the laundry or did the dishes, did the washing. And another neighbor brought in milk. This family didn't have cows. He worked for Mr. Hamilton, and he made fence posts and he cut lumber. So he apparently didn't have cows, so a neighbor brought milk. And Charlie died. And Althea was still sick. So they buried Charlie in the Fabius Evergreen Cemetery. But the mother couldn't go. She had to stay and take care of the little girl. So in April, the kids went with the mother to the cemetery so that she could see her child's burial. And it was just kind of a nice way to show what a community effort, when someone was sick, everybody gathered together and did what they could. Mr. Stanton, who was the ginseng grower from Belia Station, loaned them a wood stove to put in Charlie's room to keep the children warm, to try to get them better. Althea did recover, but they lost Charlie. And he said that no words can express the loss of the poor little boy's life on their family. That was what the notes from the diary did.
Dr. Heffron's son also became a doctor, and he became a very famous man and the dean of the College of Medicine. And one of the morals of the story is the more important you become in life, the less privacy that you have. On the web, if you look him up, you'll find that even his doodles that he did in his notebooks while he was in medical school become public information. And this was one of his professors, the dean of the school, that he thought that was what he looked like. So be careful of what you do.
Now, Dr. Heffron was real important. John Lorenzo Heffron was real important because he kicked up medicine another notch. He felt that medicine should be a learning experience in a hospital setting. So he promoted the teaching of medicine at a hospital facility, and he was the dean of College of Medicine at Syracuse. And you could see how more modern, although there's some nurses there that don't have masks on in the operating room, you can see how things are kicked up another notch. He died crossing the street in Syracuse and was hit by a car and was killed.
In the photo here we have the home in Apulia where Justice Beardsley, excuse me, Dr. Justice Beardsley lived. And he not only was a doctor, but he was a farmer and had 7 acres. I'll give everybody a minute to get through the pumpkin seed story.
The pumpkin seed story is just about a little boy and his name, was he the Bumpus boy? Is that the story about the Bumpus boy? No.
Said son of Jeremiah Burke.
Barker?
Burke. Bark.
Okay. He had a pumpkin seed caught in his throat, and everybody tried to get this pumpkin seed out of this poor kid's throat. And finally, they had Dr. Jenks and Dr. Spalding and Dr. Beardsley of Apulia. Dr. Beardsley lived in what everybody calls a picture house in Apulia, old Apulia. And he did surgery on this little boy's throat and got the pumpkin seed out, which started to sprout. And I guess maybe this is in 1865, so I guess maybe that's the first tracheotomy that we had in the town.
And the young man did survive.
Now, there's not much information on Dr. Spoonmaker. And our population is still increasing by 1860.
One of our Abbott clan members,
This guy was a dentist, and when he got out of the Civil War, we really don't know too much about him. But we got most of the information from the clerk's records. The clerks took records of the Civil War soldiers, and he was mentioned as one of them as a dentist.
and in some of the census records, it showed that he was a blacksmith previous to becoming a dentist. So what the requirements were to become a dentist, I don't know. While we were doing the research on Jared, we happened to be on eBay, and his photo was up for sale, and it had gotten up to $380. We thought it was a little too pricey, so we just right-clicked on it and stole it for this presentation. So whoever bought it, I have to apologize to them. So it's amazing to see the price of these old photographs.
And that is because he signed it. He's got a signature on the back of the card.
Or because he's such a famous person, perhaps, too.
Now, this is kind of an amusing story, and it was back in 1862, there was a man who was sick with smallpox, and he had died in his house. And this Pierce Grace was an Irishman, and he was traveling through town with his family. And he stopped at the grocery store and saw that there was a commotion and asked what was going on, and no one wanted to go in this house to bury this poor man who died from smallpox. So Pierce Grace thought it was just absolutely horrible. And so he agreed to go, and the whole townspeople followed him right to the gate of the house. And he went in and took care of the burying the man. Well, in the process, his brother was laying on a couch. I guess he was kind of sick too, and he wanted to make sure that Pierce didn't think that was the body that was to be buried. And when Pierce finished burying the body, he left the house, or went into the house and went to leave, and they had loaded up all his groceries into the wagon and headed it towards, or had it positioned out of town. They didn't want him around. That was a smallpox incident. I guess there was some of it.
This is our Dr. Hill, and we've written an article about him in our previous newsletters. And he was a doctor in town for a short time, but got the call for the Civil War. And his claim to fame is that he set up the first field hospital. to treat the soldiers on the Union side. And when the war was over, he came home because he wanted to see Hiram Adams that he had worked with before, and Hiram had just died before he got here. And then we have Dr. William Baer, who has left behind some of his medicine bottles. It always concerned me a little bit about when you would call these doctors to your bedside, was their product that they were telling you to take really going to solve your problems? And what if you didn't want to take it? Did he have any other cures for you? Now, he not only was a practicing physician, but also had his pharmacy business. And his house still stands in the village. And that became the Fabius Baptist Church parsonage. He's also buried in our cemetery. I thought Emily was right behind me.
Yeah.
Maybe my slide. Oh. We lost the slide of his daughter. Emily, his daughter, took over his pharmacy at his passing. And somewhere in here I have some slides on her because she married a chemist, and Miles Cummings, and he also made products to sell to the general public, and had kind of a traveling medicine show. And he became sickly in his later years and decided to kill himself with chloroform. And while his wife was out, he covered his face with a cloth, and she found him in bed, and his obituary mentions that he did kill himself, and he also took care of his dog at the same time.
Oh,
So Emily came back to Fabius and ran the pharmacy that her father had left behind. Although we don't have any indication that she was a real pharmacist. And we don't really understand the rules and regulations of pharmacy at the time, whether you had to be licensed.
The drugstore was just to the right of the lawn on the house, between the house and the present firehouse.
Joanna, is there anything special you can say
Well,
about?
Dr. Jenks was one that operated on the pumpkin seed.
Okay.
And Virgil was a dentist. I don't really know too much about him. Dr. Frederick Irwin, don't know too much about him other than he was born in Fabius. Dr. Albert Turner was a vet. It was Dr. Clark, or Dr. Turner was the one that operated on himself. He was a veterinarian. He operated on himself, and he was missed for 5 days, and they went to his house to see if there was anything wrong, and they found him dead.
An unsuccessful operation.
They didn't say what kind of surgery.
Just probably tonsils or something like that. Dr. Ferry occupied what we know as a Gosner house. Was also a beekeeper. Anything else, Joanne?
No,
Okay.
his practice was taken over by, well, Dr. Gosner ended up living in that house later on.
So we're beginning to get to present day time, so if anybody wants to share any of their medical experiences.
Boy, you got this all.
I guess so. Doc Pine. Anybody who's lived in Fabius for any amount of time have always heard about a person by the name of Doc Pine. Most people know that Doc was not a doctor. He and his wife probably put more miles of wallpaper on houses in the area than anybody else. And to watch those two work together hanging wallpaper was just unbelievable. They were a team and could achieve wallpaper without hardly a word. But we really did have a Doc Pine, and Dr. Milford Pine,
Was George's.
father, and Mary Babcock Pine. We find that Milford came to town as a single man, 1880, showing he's living in the census, he's living with his aunt. So he probably had met Mary Babcock while he was in Fabius, and they married, and they did have a son, George Doc Pine. Milford merchandised his various products. And he had the female cure, which I guess was probably pretty popular.
You have recipes for any of these things?
We had hoped the family might have kept some of the secret family recipes because there was at least 2 generations that these products were made, but apparently they haven't been saved or they're not sharing them. We're not sure which. But after Milford died, his wife continued to mail order these products. And one of the labels actually says that she is the successor to Milford, and she does mail these out. And when she worked in the hardware store for Carl Hamilton, she would periodically take a day off from work to bottle product to mail it out to people. So apparently she had a little bit of a business going on. Our Doc Pine did die at age of 36. In his later years, he had decided to move to Florida for the winters, and anybody who's been around Fabius for this winter realizes that Florida sounds awful good for the winters, and he did die at a young age of 36.
That house is right next door, right behind us.
Living in Fabius, we had ginseng developed and grown right here. And of course, that cured many, many, many problems. So we were awful fortunate that we had this crop grown right here. Although ginseng had a very short life. George Stanton is given the title of the father of cultivated ginseng because he was able to learn how to actually take wild roots and grow those under captivity. And he was the first man that was successful to do that. And there's what a super 15.5-ounce root looks like. And this is a company that actually merchandised ginseng tone, and this is what the beds actually looked like. They were grown in. And ginseng lasted for about 5 years before blight took out the crop. As we lost our local pharmacies, our local stores picked up the job of selling the products that the homeowners would buy and use for treating their people. We have some examples of different things that you could go into my M.J. Shea store and buy it on the counter in the back. And then, of course, here's an advertising thermometer from the Shea store. We were lucky in 1885 to have telephone service in the Bush store, and that sat where all the backhoe work is doing, removing the concrete right now. And you could have a telephone message left for you at the store, and that message could actually be delivered. It's not like you would go to the store to use the telephone. It was more of a message system. Anything on Dr. Crowhurst, Joanne?
Dr. Crowhurst was from a family of veterinarians from England, and his father was a veterinarian, and 5 of I think there were 6 or 7 kids who were veterinarians over in England. I don't think he lived in a house on the other end of the village, used to be called the Stephen Fields home. It would be this side of the King house. I think he's buried, yeah, he's buried in Evergreen Cemetery too.
Dr. James Adams. People will probably recognize the house on Pettit Street.
Right across from the old Davis Academy.
He had the house built. The land that the house now sits on was actually owned by his wife's family. He was a doctor in town for quite a long time, 1890s to finishing his practice about 1920. We tried to zero in on his window to see what his office hours were, and we just couldn't quite get enough resolution to the photo. Some more family shots. This is quite nice. This is his typical heading out to take care of his patients. He apparently liked horses. His children had donkeys. And he had a nice big horse barn out back.
And he's buried in Evergreen Cemetery too. He was married twice. His first wife, Grace Gallinger, died, and they had 2 children, and then he married Kate O'Brien, who had been married before too.
This picture is supposed to be taken in Fabius, and I don't know, I can't pick out where it is. And he's supposed to be sitting on a horse in Fabius, and I can't pick out the building in the back of that. If anybody has any ideas. Any help on?
George Barker, he wasn't here that long. Dr. Hendrickson, he wasn't here very long. He moved down to Good County. He was a veterinarian.
Emily Cummings advertised for a pharmacist to help her in her business. And R. Barton Jones had applied. He had been up to Long Lake working in a pharmacy and realized that the opportunity in Fabius was great. And Emily would want to be getting out of business soon, so he felt he could come to Fabius and buy the business and have his own pharmacy. And he did. And his wife came from a fairly well-to-do family in Buffalo. Maybe not millionaires, but they were wealthy enough to have servants. So lifestyle change to come to Fabius was quite a change. To make his pharmacy more lucrative, he decided to offer ice cream to the public. And this was kind of a rare thing to offer out in Fabius, an ice cream parlor. And we had an opportunity to interview his daughter, Adele, who's 99 years old, and just as sharp and energetic, and she loved her years in Fabius. And as we quizzed her about the ice cream, where did you get the mix to make the ice cream and everything? And she says, well, we had our own cows, and Mom and Dad milked them, and the surplus milk went into ice cream to sell to the community. And to help sell ice cream to the Fabius people, they offered a program where the children could go out and collect butterflies, exchange the butterflies for ice cream cones. Here's a picture that Adele had of the cows. And their home is this building right here. It was one of the ones.
That's the drugstore.
Okay, The home is the next one?
Then, yeah, you just see the post.
Okay.
But the long skinny building there is the drugstore. It's the only picture we have so far of the drugstore.
So where they pasture their cows is, of course, right behind the house. And you can look to the north and see the steeple from the Methodist church. And I guess it was not uncommon for village people to keep cows and have nice fresh milk. Now, the family still has the butterfly collection that they put up from the kids that had collected those in the 1920s. And the nephew of Adele says that if he can get his hands on the collection, that when his aunt passes away, he'd like to have the Fabius Historical Society own those.
What are the dates for the drugstore?
Run by the the fairs, 1879 by Emily Cummings up until 1911. Okay. And Barton Jones entered in an arrangement in Baldwinsville to buy into a drugstore business in 1927. And then he sold his home and business for the new central school to be built. So he was packed up and out of here by 1928.
They had an ice house behind their house too that kept the ice. They used to keep the ice cream cold.
And Emily Esty, in her shack handbook, writes about how she was able to get an ice cream cone even though her butterfly was pretty well beat up. And then she was properly educated in the proper methods of collecting and preserving butterflies.
Unfortunately, when they had collected enough butterflies for their butterfly collection, the kids were told no more free ice cream cones for butterflies. Disappointed.
This is just another shot of the family with Ed Rowley and R. Barton Jones and Doc Gosner socializing at DeRuyter Lake.
The other picture on the right is the corner of their house, and you can see the Fabius Baptist Church sheds right in the background there, right across the street.
And of course, you didn't always just go to see the doctor or call the doctor. When you had an ailment, you always had the homemade cures that you turned to, and maybe they were just as good as buying the doctor's medicines. Emily left us a few words about the various treatments that she survived.
And about the drying herbs that her mother had up in the attic and how she had them stored, the skunk oil and the can and all kinds of terrible things. And that's in her shack handbook that she wrote.
Can you talk about the telephone a little, Joanne?
Well, the importance of the telephone in Fabius was that when doctors or when Pearl Webb or any of the sanitarium, we had 2 sanitariums in Fabius, birthing homes or convalescing homes. Whenever they were going to be gone, they would notify Maid Comstock, and Maid Comstock had a telephone service in this house, which is it's to the east of the Methodist Church. It's still standing. And she maintained a switchboard, and she would take those messages and tell people where they could find the doctor or contact the doctor and tell where the patient could find them. And at one instance that Mary Shea DeMont told us about was that when Charles Thompson's son Gordon was killed, his mother was working relieving maid at this building, and she couldn't go to be with her dying son until someone relieved her. In case of fire, maid would leave this building and she'd run over to the church and she'd ring the bell as a warning. And she was I guess she was a thin, small person, and she would sometimes ride up the pole, ride up the rope to the bell, take her feet right off the ground.
R. Barton Jones and his family were very active in establishing the old home days to raise money to buy the very first fire truck.
And R. Barton Jones was the first man on the fire truck on the lot. They were active with the Gosler family and the Rowley family on the old home days.
And then we have some information on the Doc Gosner. We seem to always have a doctor that just kind of automatically came in behind the doctor going out of business. Dr. Andrews was leaving town. Dr. John Gosner came to town and picked up the practice, and this didn't necessarily buy out the existing practice. That seemed to work out, so we didn't go many years without a doctor. And Dr. Gosner served us quite a long time until his death, 1946. And suddenly the town was faced with no doctor. Sandy, where do you sit? Can you just mention something about polio and involvement with your family?
Well, I just recently found out that my Uncle Randall Glasgow had polio when he was young, and Miss Field had it also when she was young. And of course, Jeanette Radway Mayer ended up in the iron lung when she was an adult. So I've been very curious about the polio epidemic that was around many years ago, and how it had attacked and paralyzed the muscles and the nerves in the body. So I've been talking to Casey's about that recently, and that's how that came about.
Can you take over for a while, Joanne?
This is Pearl Webb, and everybody that's ever lived in Fabius knows about Pearl Webb. She was born on a violet farm in Poughkeepsie, and that's where they raise violets for the florist industry. She and her sister and her mother came in this direction, and her mother had left her husband, and she met a Bert Barker. Is that right, Bill?
Yep.
And they worked on different farms around the area, Fabius, Tyler, and the Pompey area. And he ended up working, I believe it was for Joe Phillips. And Joe Phillips eventually lived in a big fancy house on the corner of Pettit and Main Street. Pearl went to nursing school, Krauss-Irving, and you can see her graduation pictures on the far left. And then there's a nursing picture when she was a student in training on the bottom left. She and her sister are up in the right-hand corner, Virginia. Now, Virginia ended up being a while, is that right?
Yep.
And she married Ainsworth Webb right after she graduated from nursing school. And they moved to the house two down from the monument, which is pictured in the lower left-hand corner. And the upper left-hand corner is a picture of she and her husband Ainsworth. He was a custodian at the high school, is that right? Drove school. Okay. He drove school bus and then he was, I think,
Maybe we should ask how many people were born at Pearls.
yeah.
Can we see a show of hands? 1, 2? Just 2 people. Wow.
Harvey, were you born there? Were you born at Pearl Webs? Yes.
Yeah. 3.
I think a lot of the skills.
Yeah, Pearl Webb claimed that she was part of 300 different births. She assisted in 300.
She opened up her home, she was a nurse, and she opened up her home and she would charge $25 for 2 weeks of care, which is what it usually took after you had a baby. The laundry was tremendous. That was one of the biggest jobs, was doing all the laundry. She served you soft food to begin with, and then regular food as time went on. She usually had 2 rooms that were available for birthing. Sometimes they'd have to give up part of their living space for a 3rd bed. She also took in people that were convalescing after a hospital trip, or maybe somebody who just needed some rehab. She did that well into her, she provided that service well into her 80s. It was called the birthing home or a sanitarium. And there were some clippings down there where she delivered a baby, and quite often she did deliver a baby. She worked with Doc Gosner, and sometimes he didn't get there in time. She claims to have delivered over 300 babies, and by that time she pretty much could take care of any situation.
Muriel, did you want to talk about what it was like?
She did have 1 set of twins, and she was very excited about that. And those girls remembered her and came back to visit real often. I don't know what else to say. I do remember when penicillin first came, and people had to have intermuscular shots, but they had to be every 4 hours. So she would go to the house and give them their penicillin every 4 hours.
So the first use of penicillin was an injection every 4 hours.
Right.
It sounds painful.
We got a voice back here.
Okay.
My identical twin and I were born at the sanitarium. Mom had no idea that she was going to have twins. She was in bed for a month, so she knew something was going on there. It's about 10 pounds of baby.
What they charge for you? What they charge extra for you?
But she's worth it.
Hey Pete, weren't you born on Pearl front porch?
Yep.
That's what I thought.
I hope it was from her.
Patients did stay about 10 days. They were usually in bed for 3 days, and maybe the 4th and 5th day, mom would get up and sit in the rocking chair. But now, girls go to Paso, and most of us come home the same day, so.
Muriel Partridge is the daughter of Pearl Webb, and we're honored to have her today and having her share her photos of the family and remembrances. So
And Muriel's also a nurse.
we blame it on Pearl, all her early exposure that put her into the nursing career. And there she is a few years ago. Just like yesterday, isn't it?
That was a nursing program that they used through the war. We were cadet nurses. The only stipulation was we had to stay in nursing for 2 years after we graduated. Army furnished our uniforms, and our tuition and books, and we had a small monthly stipend.
And where did you actually take classes?
At Cross, I
Yeah.
graduated from Cross in the city. We were 2.5 years in school.
Had you graduated by the time this picture was taken? Or?
No, that was while I was still a student. I was home. We had gray uniforms with red trim. And, probably, you got the other picture, have you?
No.
The other picture was, we had gray skirts and gray jackets. And then we wore the regular hospital uniforms, white, aprons over.
This is the other nursing, or the other sanitarium or birthing home, and it's at the other end of the village. And it's the present home of Susan and Richard King, also was the Edmund Shea homestead, and that's Mary Shea, Edmund's daughter, in the carriage up on the upper left-hand corner. This is where Teresa Kogut was born, in this house.
Second house from Mill Street, was outside.
So is the downstairs
Yeah.
front room?
Yeah.
We couldn't find out much information about how long this facility was in business. So we did ask Teresa what she remembered being born there. And she's got a good memory. She remembered what room she was born in. I was hoping maybe somebody in the audience would know a little bit more about this.
My mother walked to that house. How far away did you live? Oh, okay.
In 1946, we lost our Dr. Gosner, and the Fabius community for the first time was faced with another doctor just didn't show up. The community itself went out to look for a doctor, and everybody who came would say, gee, you don't have an office, you don't have a residence, there's nothing for me to take over, I don't really want to come and start my business. The Fabius Realty Corporation was formed and donations were taken from everybody with the hopes of bringing Dr. Joseph Bredney to town. They bought this house, which we'll see at present day picture in a minute, rehabbed it, made it arrangements with Dr. Bredney to become our physician, with a stipulation that if everything went well and his practice grew, that he would buy the complex and pay everybody back.
This was a joint effort of Fabius and Pompey, too.
And
To bring it.
quite an amazing thing to raise enough money to have it all happen. And it appeared to have happened in about a year's time. Here's a calendar of Dr. Bredney that he sent out of his completed medical facility. Dr. Bredney meeting local people, and an accounting of all the money that was raised and how it was spent to rehab the house. Looking at the house here, the photo doesn't do it justice, but it did not look very good. And in the picture, it has really come along. And you'll see even Iva Pine did the wallpapering. Is that $64 worth or 84? I can't. Yeah. So a lot of local people were involved in the work, plus the $14,900 that was raised. And of course, the present day photo of the building with the for sale sign out front.
Bill,
Yes.
they moved that horse barn over onto that
Yeah.
house, and that made the doctor, or the doctor.
Yeah.
I
This
went to the auction.
auction of the,
They auctioned off the guy who used to own stuff. But then they moved that over, and that's where the doctor's office is. It used to be the horse.
this portion of the building, Dr. Bredney actually, once he was in the building, said that he would move the building over and attach it at his own expense as his business grew and he needed more space. And Dr. Bredney was with us for 8 years before he decided to move on, selling his practice out. Well,
That second picture is from the other side of it.
yes.
And
Yeah.
on the street side. The other one is taken from Academy Street side.
We have some of Dr. Bredney's cures here. And Dr. Sheehan came in to replace Dr. Bredney and didn't stay with us very long. At one time, Fabius had his own optometrist, Dr. William Kinslow, just outside the east side of town. He operated a facility in Syracuse, never intending to move his business out here, but he found that his patients really enjoyed coming from their homes to Fabius to enjoy the country view and have their eyes worked on, glasses made, so he said he was successful out here. This is, of course, the residence of, help me with the name, Joanne?
Joe Phillips.
Joe Phillips, thank you. And another doctor we don't know.
He didn't spend much time here. He was a dentist there and moved to Tully soon after. That was an Irving Steele built house.
You could get your veterinarian's license by mail order. And we had a mail order veterinarian, Charles Nehemiah Thompson. And he was a cattle dealer and a horse trader. And also got his diplomas through the mail order system. And the American Veterinarian Association had determined that the company was a fake and a fraud. But still had these nice diplomas that you could take the course.
What's the postage on a cow? The postage on a cow. You get your mail order.
The fee for this,
They didn't apprentice anybody or?
no,
You
I
took
think
a class.
a class, and if you passed and mailed in your exams, I think the whole fee was $8.50 to get your license. And in the census, he did record himself as a veterinarian, but he was a horse dental veterinarian. That was his specialty. A couple more names that show up that we don't know an awful lot about.
Most of these guys were born in Fabius, but they didn't practice here. But they did, some of them were brought back to be buried.
Ah, the best slide of all. I believe that ends our information that we have to share.
Out of the total time period that you're talking about, how many of these doctors were veterinarians and regular medical doctors? Do you know?
I never saw a veterinarian working on people
No, but.
or a physician working on animals. I never seen any indication of a cross.
But you referred to some of the vets having lived in town and also some of the physicians, so I was trying to differentiate how many of each one were there.
We didn't seem to have very many veterinarians for the high cow population. You know, Fabius always seemed to have more cows than people.
Okay.
And we sure didn't seem to have the number of veterinarians.
But it seemed like 10 vets, and how many physicians roughly over that time period?
There's probably 25 on our list. Some of them only came to Fabius and got rich in a year and moved away. So
The house going out of Fabius is east of Fabius as you start to climb the hill. Marty Woodford and Joey live there now. Was that a doctor's house or a dentist?
yes.
What doctor lived there?
It's Dr. Kinslow.
Well, thank you. That's great. Bill, let me ask you something. When you sent a link to me where I could access your book, is that link available to other people?
We need to make a decision on whether or not we want to open it to the public or not.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
The board has got to decide whether they want to make a book, but we also have to go back and add comments.
Okay, so at this point, you don't know?
yeah.
Yeah, they sent me a link so I could look at their program. I was very impressed. And so if it is ever available, we'll try to let you know. It's a very good experience, but you've seen a lot of information. Folks, we got some great refreshments over here. Hang around, talk to people. Come back next time. And I will put the listing of the programs over on the table. I don't think I did that, did I?
No.
Okay. So Irene and Sandy have done it again. They've got some great stuff for you here, including coffee. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, pardon me. Yes, there are some things, and over here at the end of the table is a very fine picture of Pearl Webb when they were celebrating her 90th birthday. And so you may want to take a look at that. Okay?
Saw the slide with it. I don't think so.
There was some
think the stills would be more helpful.
Yeah, but they can print these out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but do we want to send these out to the world yet? No. They want people to like edit and correct or whatever. I told them I thought some.
It was about the vegetation that's in his pond. He wants to know the vegetation in his pond. He's looking for carpet and take care of the vegetation. I told him that I want one in there and that's it. Because it's not a very big pond.